The reason that it's important, I think, to set that up is we now come to what I really wanted to hear your views on, artificial intelligence, because science is giving us extraordinary capabilities.
Yes.
But will we simply be seduced by it in the sense that artificial intelligence is rapidly creating things that are marvelous, that we want to enjoy, that may satiate us, may dull us, while aspects of the emergence of AI could be very dangerous. But before we start to explore that, for ordinary people in the street like me who are not living with this, I am living with this stuff, but don't know where it might go, we need to define some terms. What is AI? I think you call it narrow AI, of the sort that we're quite familiar with, limited intelligence but highly focused on narrow areas. What is artificial general intelligence, and where might that go? There's a whole number of issues. Then there's the whole issue of transhumanism. So can we start with, very broadly, AI is what, John? How would you explain it to a layman? We've all heard the term.
Oh, sure. But, well, the first thing to realize is that the word artificial in the phrase artificial intelligence is real. And that's not due to me, it's due to one of the pioneers of the subject who happens to be a Christian. And the point is that, and we'll take a narrow AI system first because it's much easier to explain. A narrow AI system is a system involving a high-powered computer, a huge database, and an algorithm that does some picking and choosing, whose output is something that it normally requires human intelligence to do. That is, if you look at the output, you would say normally that it's taken an intelligent person to do that. So let's take an example that is very important these days in medicine, and that's X-ray, interpreting X-ray. So we have a database. Let's say it has 1 million X-rays of lungs that are infected with various diseases, say related to COVID. They are then labeled in the database by the world's top experts. Then they take an X-ray of your lungs or my lungs, and the algorithm compares the X-ray of your lungs with the million very rapidly, and it produces an output which says John Anderson has got that disease. Now, at the moment, that kind of thing, which is being rolled out not only in radiology but all over the place, will generally give you a better result than your local hospital will. And that's hugely important and hugely valuable. But the point is, the machine is not intelligent. It's only doing what it's programmed to do. The database is not intelligence. The intelligence is the intelligence of the people that designed the computer, know about X-rays and know about medicine. But the output is what you would expect from an intelligent doctor. So it's in that sense artificial. It's a system narrow in the sense it only deals with one thing. And all kinds, endless kinds of systems are being rolled out around the world. And some of them, as you mentioned, are extremely beneficial. Narrow AI has been used in the development of vaccines, and the spin-off from that technology is enormous in drug development. And on it goes. And I could give you dozens of examples, and they're in my book. So that's where we start. Now, we are familiar with it, and it's worth giving a second example of it, because most of us voluntarily are wearing, first of all, a tracker. It's called a smartphone.
Yes.
It knows where we are. It could be even recording what we're saying. But what it does do, of which we're all aware, is if we, for example, buy a book on Amazon, we'll very soon get little pop-ups that say people that bought that book are usually interested in this book. And what's happening there is the AI system is creating a database of your preferences, your interests, your likes, your purchases, and is using that to compare with its vast database of available things for sale so that it predicts what you might like. So this is of huge commercial value. And it leads to something else which most of us don't know about, and we can come to that later, but I'll mention it now, which is called surveillance capital. And there's a book by an emerita professor at MIT called Susanna Zuboff, and it's regarded as a very serious book because the point she's making is global corporations are using your data and without your permission are selling it off to third parties and making a lot of money out of it. And that raises deep privacy issues. So now you're straight into the ethics. So that's narrow AI.
Okay, so let's stay on narrow AI and extend our road a little bit further down towards broader use. You've just talked about us being unaware in a way of how we're being surveilled.
Yes.
And it was right here in Oxford. I think it may have been you who made the point. I can't remember. In a talk that I heard where the point was made that what's happening in China using artificial intelligence to surveil people is astonishing. But in many ways, all that information is being collected in the West as well. It's just not collated in the same way.
That's correct. And this is perhaps one of the scariest aspects of it. What we're talking about here is facial recognition by closed-circuit television. Well, it starts with facial recognition, but we've now got to the stage where in China in particular, they can recognize you from the back by your gait, by all kinds of things. And what has happened is, and you can see the positive benefit, police want to arrest criminals or thugs or rowdies even in a football crowd, and so using facial recognition technology they can pick a person out and arrest him or her. Well, okay, but what it can be used for good purposes in that sense in keeping law and order can also become, particularly in an autocratic state, become an instrument of control. Here's the huge dilemma which people try to solve. How much of your privacy are you prepared to sacrifice for security? There's a tension between those two things. Now, in China, you mentioned, and you're probably thinking about Xinjiang, where you've got a minority, a Muslim minority of Uyghur people. The surveillance level on them is unbelievable. Every few hundred meters down the street, they have to stop, they have to hand in their smartphones. The smartphones are loaded with all kinds of stuff by the government. Their houses have QR codes outside them as to how many people live there and all this kind of thing. And I don't know how many, it's way over 1 million, I believe, are being held as a result of what is being picked up by artificial intelligence systems in re-education centres. And the suspicion is that the culture is being destroyed and eradicated. That's the one hand, that's in one particular province. Elsewhere in China, we have now the social credit system that apparently will be rolled out in the entire country. We're given, say, you and I were given to start with, let's say, 300 social credit points. And we're being trailed. If we fail to put our rubbish trash can out at night, there'll be marks against us. If we go to somewhere dubious or mix with someone whose political loyalties are suspect, we'll get more negative points. On the other hand, if we pay our debts on time and go green, so to speak, and all this kind of thing, we will amass more credit points. And then, if we are going negative, the penalties kick in. We'll discover we can't get into our favorite restaurant. We'll discover we don't get that promotion or don't even get that job we apply for, or that we can't travel, or that we can't even have a credit card. And this is being rolled out, and the list of penalties and things that have actually been recorded is just very serious. Now, what amazed me when I first came across this was the fact that many people welcome this. They think it's wonderful. They boast, I got 1,000 points. How many have you got? And they don't realize that the whole of life is becoming controlled in the interest, ostensibly, of having a healthy society. It is, talk about 1984. Now, this is not futuristic speculation. This is already happening. George Orwell, you mentioned him, who wrote 1984. He talked about Big Brother watching you, and that technology would eventually, it is doing it. This is narrow AI. This is not futuristic in any way. It's what's actually happening at the moment. And you mentioned briefly the fact that all this stuff exists in the West, except, and the point has been made forcibly, it's not quite yet under one central authority and control, but it is coming. We have credit searches, we have all kinds of stuff that is beginning to creep in the US and in the UK, and I presume also in Australia. And also we have even police forces here, I believe, who want the whole caboodle in here, who want to be able to exert a much more serious level of control. And it is frightening because what it does for human rights is well.
So it occurs to me that, I love history, as I've mentioned. Authoritarian regimes have collapsed under their own weight. Typically, the people have risen up one way or another and there's been an overturning. We've never had autocratic regimes that have had this surveillance capacity. There's, an estimated 400 million closed-circuit television sets in China. That's one for about every 3 people. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
Oh, it is mind-boggling. And even here in the UK, what I'm told is that you're on a closed-circuit TV camera every 5 minutes when you're moving around. So it is very serious. And of course, the irony is, as I hinted at earlier, here we are with our smartphones that have got all these capacities, certainly at the audio level, and we're voluntarily wearing them. So we're voluntarily ceding part of our autonomy and our rights, really, to these machines when we don't really know what is being done with all the information. So we have a huge problem. Someone has said we're sleepwalking into all of this, so that we're captured by it, we're imprisoned by it, and we wake up too late because the central authority has got so much control that we cannot escape anymore.
So let's go back to where I started. Science is blessing us because they are fantastic, a lot of these things, with incredible technology and capabilities that you've alluded to some of the useful things. I mean, I love the way in which I can, in my car, say, hey, Siri, call my wife.
Yes.
That's just fantastic. But my question about what we now believe goes to the heart of who do we think we are, what is our status, on what basis will we be alert enough to recognise we need to make tough decisions, and then on what basis will we make the ethical decisions around how far this goes. I know that's a complicated question, but there's another element to it, because we haven't even got into general artificial intelligence yet. We're still talking, as I understand it, about narrow artificial intelligence, just masses of it.
Yes, we
Those
are.
surveillance cameras and the people at their desks in Beijing, collating the information and what have you. There might be a lot of information and a lot of capability, but those cameras can't think of another task, how to go and bring my boss a cup of coffee. It's still narrow.
That's absolutely right.
And it's before we've got to general intelligence.
Yes. What we got to realize several things. First of all, the speed of technological development out ethical underpinning by a huge factor, an exponential factor. Secondly, some people are becoming acutely aware that they need to think about ethics. Yeah. And some of the global players, to be fair, do think about this because they find the whole development scary. Is it going to get out of control? And someone made a very interesting point I think it was a mathematician who works in artificial intelligence, and she was referring to the book of Genesis in the Bible. She said, God created something and it got out of control, us. We are now concerned that our creations may get out of control. And I suppose in particular, one major concern is autonomous or self-guiding weapons. And that's a huge ethical field. Here's a man sitting in a trailer in the Nevada desert, and he's controlling a drone in the Middle East, and it fires a rocket and destroys a group of people. And of course, he just sees a puff of smoke on his screen, and that's it done. And there's huge distance between the operation of that lethal mechanism. And we only go up one more from that, where these lethal flying bombs, so to speak, control themselves. We got swarming drones and we got all kinds of stuff. Who's going to police that? He could shoot a nuclear tactical weapon, or it could be controlled autonomously, make its own decision.
Yeah,
and then where do we go from there? And of course, every country wants them because they want them to have a military advantage.